Welcome to the pre-test discussion for the subject of ethics, integrity and aptitude. My name is Ankit Sharma and I'm going to be the instructor for this discussion. Okay, so in this discussion, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically introduce you to some basic elements and ideas which are associated with the subject of ethics, generally speaking, so that the questions that you attempt and the answers that you write, etc., have a kind of a background as to understanding the framework in which question answers in this kind of a subject are operating. Okay, so if you take a look at the subject, or what our area of understanding which we're covering is divided into three terms: ethics, integrity and aptitude. Okay. Ethics, integrity and aptitude, right? So when we think about ethics, we have generally three elements in which ethics, integrity and aptitude can be academically or pedagogically divided into three subject areas from which the information is drawn. Okay, ethics is generally understood to be a part of philosophy. Integrity is generally understood to be a part of psychology, which includes concepts like emotional intelligence. This is a symbol for psychology for later references. And aptitude generally refers to public administration, or let's say more specifically the Civil Services Aptitude, as it is called, right? The public administration ethics, or pub ad ethics, etc., etc., right? So these are the three categories into which the syllabus of ethics is at a generic level divided. When we are reading about ethics, we are reading the core ideas from philosophy. For instance, more generally, if I can point it out, it could be called moral philosophy. Okay, and when we're reading about integrity, we're reading about psychology, or more generally, if I can point it out, moral psychology. And when we're reading about aptitude, we are more generally talking about civil services aptitude, which is a part of the public administration, or the ethics of public administration in general, right? So this is our title of the syllabus point as it is given: ethics, integrity and aptitude. Okay, now one thing to remember very clearly at this point of time while reading this kind of a syllabus is to very clearly read the first paragraph of the syllabus itself. Now this is a generic paragraph. This is a generic paragraph, which basically means it does not specify the points of coverage which the examination will have, or the ideas which are going to be asked as questions. What it says is a kind of a, is a preamble to how the ethics paper should be. And in a way, it reveals a lot about how the examination is, constructed, and the question answers are informed therein. Okay. So we have to pay special attention to this paragraph. Let's read it in a little bit of a detail to set our tone for understanding the kind of papers that we have to be attempting later. Ethics, integrity and aptitude. This is the title of the subject. This paper will include questions to test the candidate's attitude and approach to issues relating to integrity, probity in public life, and his problem-solving approach to various issues and conflict faced by him in dealing with society. Questions may utilize the case study approach to determine these aspects. The following broad areas would be covered, right? So you can see, ending from this point, we come to the specific or the particular points which are a part of the ethics syllabus. Okay, but before that, what we have is something that we can analyze into simpler dimensions. For instance, what we have is this paper will include questions to test the candidate's attitude and approach. Okay, attitude and approach to issues relating to integrity, probity in public life, and his problem-solving approach to various issues and conflicts faced by him in dealing with the society, right? So categorically, if I have to analyze this, I can break it down into two aspects. This first part of the syllabus, that is, there has to be something which is called the individual and the values that are associated with being an individual, which basically is the part in which we are going to cover most of the philosophy and psychology. For instance, the term conscience, okay, relates both to the subject of philosophy. What do we understand by the concept of conscience? Or for instance, what are the values which are associated with the idea of conscience. Okay, let's say values like dignity, honesty, integrity, compassion, empathy, gratitude. All these are values which are to be understood at the level of the individual and at the level of personal level. Right? So this is basically what we understand, where we are going to understand the internal mechanisms of what is right and wrong, good and bad, just and unjust, etc., internally from our own conscience. Okay, so this is the first thing that would be tested in this examination, that do you have the substance to be able to differentiate and distinguish it between these intricacies. For instance, what is the nature of values, what is the nature of conscience, what is the good action as separate from bad action, etc., etc. Okay, one thing to be remembered over here is that this is a part of the ethical training in which we do not have to, at this point of time, think a lot about what we have to do in world, rather than just train ourselves to be ethical individuals, right? So to inculcate values is the first part, or whether values have been inculcated properly, especially moral values, in the subject. This is the first thing that would be checked, right? So for instance, in this question, in this part, you can have questions asking, a detail on the value of, let's say, compassion. What do you understand by compassion? Okay, there was a previous year question which asked, what do you understand by happiness? Okay, let's say they can ask you the question, what do you understand by fortitude? Okay, so these are the kind of questions that can be asked from this particular relevance of the literature of the syllabus. Okay, what is compassion, what is happiness, what is fortitude, let's say what is dignity. Okay, so these are the areas which are going to be covered in this particular part of the syllabus, in which it is said this paper will include questions to test the candidate's attitude and approach to issues relating to integrity, probity in public life. Right, till here. Right, now from the and part, the next part also begins. Okay, the next part begins by saying that, let's say you have inculcated certain values in your life, you are an individual who is value based and driven by personal integrity, etc. The question now is, can you solve problems of the society based upon these values? Okay, this is the question that is the second part of our syllabus. Can you solve the real world problems? Can you solve the problems of the society, generally speaking, based upon these values, right? So in this particular part, it is not enough to just be personally ethical or personally moral or personally value oriented. What you will be tested upon is your ability to be able to solve certain issues and problems which are being faced by the society, or generally, for instance, the department of which you're a part of. If you can solve these problems based upon these values. Okay, so generally speaking, I have a very simple diagrammatic representation to inform on the kind of things that would be important at this part in regard. So let's say what I do is, generally I use 3 circles to identify it. I call the first circle substance, okay, which deals with what you can call a personal morality or personal ethics. For instance, what is dignity, what is virtue, what is compassion, what is happiness, what is philanthropy. All of this is basically what we can call substance, as in what is the core element or core moral definitions or ideas which are present in our conscience and our soul, right? Then the last circle related to this part is what I can call circumstance. Okay, circumstance, which basically implies that what are the conditions, right? As you can see that the term stance is in a way common to both of them. Okay, a substance means something that exists underneath, let's say, our conscience or our soul or our emotions, etc., right? And circumstance is the kind of situation that we have been placed in. Okay, the kind of social and political order, the kind of society, the kind of environment, etc., under which we are operating. Okay, so generally what happens is that the substance And the circumstance has its own, let's say this material, which is basically the core of all of ethics, right? And the circumstances have a kind of a, a role that they play upon this material. Okay, but if I want to be truthful, but generally truthfulness is a kind of a liability in a society, जहाँ पे सत्य बोलने से मुश्किलें और ज़्यादा बढ़ती हैं, कम नहीं होती हैं. So that is my circumstance. So this basically means that is the pressure which is being exerted upon me by the circumstance, right? And that kind of a pressure which is being exerted upon me by the circumstance gives rise to my own choices that I make as to how to keep my conscience also, keep my values also in place, but at the same point of time not be completely dissociated with the social or political or public reality which has been given by the circumstance. Right? So this is the part in which I modify my actions, including my value, but also according to the need of the circumstances. And this is known as my, okay, so this kind of a, 3-pin diagram, which is giving 3 ideas: circumstance, stance, and substance. Okay, circumstance, stance, and substance. This kind of a 3-layered idea can be relevant in giving us an information about how you can divide the questions and answers in the ethics paper, right? So the first part, let's say for instance, which I indicated in the first paragraph of the syllabus, says that we have to first impress the examiner upon the fact that there is some moral substance in us, like there's some moral fiber in us, which is basically the philosophical and the psychological part, right? And the second part, we have to convince the examiner that using that moral fiber or the value system or the ideas, we can operate within a circumstance, okay, survive within a circumstance, and also possibly change the circumstance. It is not an option for a civil servant or a person pursuing public administration at any capacity to be dissociated with the circumstance, because that person feels that his values cannot survive within a particular social and political order, right? So this kind of an alienation, this kind of a anti-society nature of an individual is something which is generally not feasible or tenable for a person who's looking for serving the nation through the civil services. And this kind of an ethic or this kind of a value of being able to have values in the first place, which is absolutely necessary and essential, that you must have values. At the same time, your values must be modified according to the circumstances which are present in the current scenario. You cannot run away from the fact of the particular circumstance. So the way you modify, the way you, in a way mold and, kind of have a flexible response to the circumstance is known as your stance, right? So this is the sweet spot that you generally have to aim at to arrive at in all of the answers in the ethics paper.